Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am very pleased to welcome back Comptroller Susana Mendoza, who we really originally wanted to talk about the government freeze. Remember, spending was frozen for everything, and then it was unfrozen, and then we were told that we were mistaken. It was never actually frozen at all, which is, gaslighting of the highest order. But I would like to know from our Comptroller, Susana Mendoza, exactly what the state of Illinois can do to protect itself from this chaotic federal government that we have now. Susana, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Joan? It's so nice to hear your voice and be back on the show.
It's so nice to have you back here. You are always a breath of fresh air, and everything you say is so sensible. So give us advice on how to gird our loins here.
I know it's interesting times we're living in. These are really uncharted. We're going through uncharted territory, and uncharted, I should say, territory to be exact and correct. But it's, I will tell you that, what you said, I felt like we were playing tennis, right? Back and forth. It's like you're getting whiplash. I'm like, What is it? Was there a freeze? Was there not a freeze? They say there's not a freeze. I can just assure you there was a freeze because the state of Illinois was locked out of the federal system that would allow us to submit payments for Medicaid and therefore be able to submit our request for reimbursements. I received that day multiple calls from or texts from hospital CEOs completely in a panic about whether or not this was really happening for the state because they were frozen out of the federal Medicaid portal. And when you're talking about Medicaid, you're talking about the most vulnerable people across the country who receive care for medical services, people with disabilities, people in extreme poverty. And, disease and disability certainly does not differentiate between Democrats and Republicans. So the amount of pushback that the Trump administration got once people started realizing that they were in fact locked out of Medicaid, I think was significant. And so this concept that it was a glitch or that it was,
that was my favorite. No, we didn't know. We didn't do anything about that. It was just a coincidence.
Sure, right? So the truth is they were either grossly incompetent or, super cruel. And, either one of those two options is not a good option. So thankfully that has been temporarily, I would say, rescinded. And it's not because they chose to. I mean, if they would have, in fact, said we're okay with all this federal funding going out the door and it was a mistake, then they wouldn't have been trying to petition a judge to side with them instead of with the state's attorneys across the country who came together to ask for this temporary restraining order. And thankfully, this federal judge did, in fact, side with goodness here and protecting people and went ahead and issued this temporary restraining order. But, I think it's important that people realize that this is just the beginning of the Trump administration's really kind of attack on vital programs and the people who need them the most. And again, I think it's just bad strategy because you're talking about Americans of all political persuasions. They're just trying to get by, and they rely on federal programs in ways that they may not even realize that they do.
Some people have said that what he's been doing is sort of like testing, doing something that is, of course, not only unprecedented, but almost always illegal, to see if he'll get any pushback, to see just, the fascist dictators do this. They keep pushing, they fought back on this, but they didn't fight back on this. So I'm going to push a little more over here. That what we're seeing now is kind of like Trump testing the waters of how much resistance there's going to be. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, Joan, I would not say it's kind of like, it is exactly that. And these are trial balloons that were put out there, some of which, they may be surprised by how much they can get away with. And then they may also be surprised with what they can't get away with, right? And again, when you're hitting areas where, like I said, disease and disability doesn't pick political parties or preference, it just picks people. And a lot of those people are his voters. And they're like, this is not what I signed up for, right? Mm-hmm. So look, everybody can think that they want to create Yeah, you've heard me on your show many times. I'm a fiscal, hawk. I'm a fiscal watchdog. I take pride in trying to stretch the value of every dollar to work hard for taxpayers because it's not my money, it's their money. Sometimes to the disdain of my own party, right, where I come out and say we need to be more fiscally disciplined. But the reality of it is I have a track record of looking for efficiencies everywhere we can find them without compromising service to the people that we serve, because I truly believe that we could provide better service at lower cost, and that is a reflection of my respect for the hard work of taxpayers. So I'll be the first person to say where we can trim our belt, tighten our belt, trim the fat, tighten our belt, and still provide those quality services. That's showing respect for taxpayers. Having said that, what he did was take like a blowtorch or drop a nuke across the country, metaphorically speaking, of course, in terms of the stability and predictability that taxpayers should have from their government at the federal level. It created chaos and panic and disruption instead of providing stability and predictability and trust, right? So you can think that you're all about efficiencies and you can applaud this guy for what they're doing until it's your kid that needs that cancer treatment that doesn't get it anymore. And then you're going to be like, whoa, hold on. It's not supposed to happen to my family, right? And so I think what you're seeing from Democrats is that we're saying every American or every person living and breathing in this country should be concerned about this direction. This is not what people signed up for. I don't think it's what most reasonable people signed up for.
No, and I'm so tired of hearing that from people, who get sold this message, we're going to cut the fat, we're going to cut the waste. And I don't know what people, when they vote for somebody like that, think, when I go to the DMV, there's usually 6 clerks. Maybe next year there'll only be 5. And, maybe that's a cost savings, or maybe that means I sit for another hour. But I've heard so many people, who get sold on this. We're going to cut the waste. We're going to cut the fat. And then all of a sudden, it's so much easier to cut a social program. One of my friends once voted for a Republican who was, we're going to be pro-business. And a program that her son needed was one of the first things he cut. And she actually looked at me and she said, well, I didn't think he was going to cut that, because that's what Republicans do. That message, we're going to cut the fat, that sounds so great. But before you vote for somebody like that, ask them to tell you, what do you see as the fat? Where is the fat? Tell me 3 things that you think are wasteful that you're going to get rid of. Because I think people are always like, well, wait a minute, not that,
Yeah, cut there, but not here, right? So, realistically speaking, there's always places, for the most part, that you can trim without sacrificing services. In fact, you can sometimes provide better services by getting rid of a lot of the, repetitive inefficiencies and stuff like that. But, this guy has certainly not earned the trust of people to trust him on doing that. Elon Musk coming in and just imploding everything, there's zero trust factor right there. Look how he treats his own employees. You think he's going to have the best interest of regular Americans at heart? Yeah. I don't think so. So they haven't earned that yet. And I do believe that, elections are important and they have consequences and they give powers, but they don't give unlimited powers. And this is not a monarchy. It's a democracy. And so it is very, very scary that 3 to 4 of the richest people in the universe, literally, right, are in control of our government and calling the shots. And it's a scary time that we're living in, but, it's also, like I said, it's uncharted, and we've got to figure out how to get through certainly these next 2 years, really this next year. And it's going to be interesting because obviously Illinois has some serious, financial challenges ahead of us, even in the best of circumstances. And then now to think that they could be looking at the next budget season as one in which they just slash federal funding to all blue states, and just create massive panic and chaos. I don't know how that helps our country, but we've got to prepare, I think, hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Yeah. I'm talking to Comptroller Susana Mendoza. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more right after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Comptroller Susana Mendoza is here with us, and we have been talking about the hiring freeze that almost was but then wasn't. What can you do, Susana, to prepare yourself when, it's not like, I guess maybe, if we look at Project 2025, that gives us an idea of what's coming. But so much of this administration seems to be shoot from the hip. Oh, I woke up this morning with a great idea. Let me tweet it out and make sure, it becomes part of the government. I don't know how you prepare to protect Illinois from that kind of chaos.
Yeah, well, you have to be nimble, right? You have to be forward thinking. And, as far as my office is concerned, I'm super closely monitoring the situation, and we're going to do the one thing that we're really good at, and that's keep getting payments out as fast as humanly possible. I'll tell you what, one of my, super proud moments was when this horrible chaos erupted that the bond buyer called me and asked, how many Medicaid bills are you guys sitting on? And I said 0. I literally got every single bill out the door on Thursday, and we received our entire federal match the day before the freeze. And so she's like, oh, my goodness, did you see this coming? And I said, look, I'm good, but not that good. I go, but this is how I've been managing the state's finances from day one, even during the budget impasse. It was always prioritizing the most vulnerable people and taking advantage of federal matches as quickly as humanly possible. So it's the opposite of what controllers before me did. It's how I've talked to you before about paying down the bill backlog and paying it down before getting any federal ARPA in the door, because I've just been managing the money as best as humanly possible for taxpayers. So I don't know what other states were like, but I know that there was panic across the country. But here in Illinois, I literally didn't have any bills to pay with Medicaid because they were already out the door, and we had already received our refund. Having said that, if that freeze would have continued, it would have put every state in a very precarious situation. So as we go into this next budget season, Joan, it's really going to have to be we're going to have to probably have multiple types of budgets in place. One that is a catastrophe budget, another that's just like a normal kind of bad budget with limited revenues and potential, hole in the budget that we have to plug, which means where do you tighten up, without sacrificing services or the least amount of pain. And then, hopefully a normal, somewhat positive moving forward growth related budget. So not growth in terms of new spending, but economic growth potential for the state of Illinois. And so I think that the governor knows that he's got a really tough job this year relative to other years where we've been in a much better situation. But really the hardest part of this job right now for the legislature and for the governor is trying to predict what's unpredictable. But I actually don't think it's unpredictable. I think we can predict chaos. Mm-hmm. And so you have to prepare for that. Prepare for a worst-case scenario, but hope that it doesn't end up being as bad as we think it might potentially be. So, it's math at the end of the day, Joan, right? You've got to figure out how much money's coming in, what's going to be taken away, and then have the honest conversations with the legislature and the public as to what's affordable and what's not.
When you say this next budget season that to really prepare, there probably need to be several different budgets. And one of those you mentioned was a catastrophe budget. Would you foresee
budget, right?
Yeah, something like that being, okay, what if we get absolutely no money from the federal government? What would that look like? What would our income be? What would we fund at that point? Is that as catastrophic? That it seems pretty catastrophic.
Yeah. I feel like you have to at least think about, in a worst-case scenario, what would your budget look like, right? And have that discussion. Because the reality of it is that right now, at this moment in time, as we go to craft our budget, the Republicans are in control of every chamber. They have the House, they have the Senate, and they have the president. And even for those Republicans who might normally go off the reservation, because, every party has their extremists, right, who under no circumstances want to go with the administration. I have a hard time believing that in this climate, there's any Republican who, if push comes to shove, will bail on Donald Trump, on President Trump. So the one thing they might hate more than having to toe their party line is Democrats. And so I think that's the unifying factor in trying to, potentially just shut down government. It's really reminiscent, if you think about it, to our budget impasse under Bruce Rauner. but this is at a federal level. So we've seen this play out before. So Illinoisans should not be naive about what could potentially be coming down the pipeline. And if we don't prepare for a doomsday scenario and start having these conversations with the public, then kind of shame on us for, not understanding that we can be back there again. We're not going to be back there as a state because of something we did to ourselves, but we're a blue state. In a state where, they love to beat up on Illinois, they love to pound on Chicago and make an example out of our state, and so we're not in a situation where they're going to be looking to give our leaders the benefit of the doubt as they craft their really cruel budget moving forward. So I could totally see them trying to strip of us all kinds of federal funding, shifting those dollars to other red states as an example. And we have to assume that even with a $3.2 billion projected budget deficit, without this nonsense happening, that's bad enough. But then add to that potentially losing billions in federal funds, we're looking at a very precarious situation moving forward.
If Donald Trump, who loves revenge and retribution, if Donald Trump does decide that maybe federal funds should only go to red states, could we stop paying our taxes? Because if we're not going to get money back from the federal government, it seems to me we should no longer be sending money to the federal government. So I would like your permission, if that happens, to stop paying my taxes.
Well, I can't give you that permission, but you know what's extra insulting in this whole equation is that it's the blue states that keep these red states fiscally solvent. Illinois has been a donor.
Well, even, we hear from Southern Illinois, we want to secede, if maybe we should be part of Indiana. And I'm like, you want to join one of the poorest states in the nation and give up all that money that comes your way from Chicago? There's a part of me that's, okay, kids, you go with God. See how that works out for you.
Yeah, it will not work out well. But again, in this case, it's one of these situations where Illinois, New York, California, Connecticut, these are all, Delaware, they're all states that are net givers to the rest of the country, the red states. So all of those states are essentially welfare states, but they pretend that they're fiscally responsible. And they don't even have the common courtesy to say thank you to the blue states for keeping them afloat. Meanwhile, our state, on average, I think it's like $5 billion that we give extra in federal taxes that we don't get to benefit from because they're going to Kentucky or Alabama or some other red state who then turns around and talks about how we're so bad with money. The only reason they have money is because we're sending it to them. And so now it's going to add insult to injury that if the president wants to punish blue states with his retribution and send money to red states, they're going to, on top of what we already give them, they're going to have even more. They're still not going to know what to do with it because they're not known for being really well run. But Illinois is going to have to work that much harder just to stay afloat. So it's, I'm hopeful that, something will work itself out, that we've got Democrats who are going to be fighting the good fight at the national level. But, it'd be naive of me to also lie to people and say that this is not a very, very serious situation.
Thank you so much, Susana. It's always such a pleasure to talk with you. And I have a feeling as the chaos unfolds in D.C., we're going to be talking a lot more about, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? But I'm glad that you're there and that you're on top of things. I think that's exactly what we need right now. And thank you for being here.
No, my pleasure. I can tell you that, that 2-year budget impasse and everything I had to do to, get through that and get our state through that, I guess it was practice for what's coming. So this is not something that will make me panic or make me lose my cool. We're ready to do whatever we need to do to stand up for Illinois. And, they give us a bag of rotten lemons. We're going to make some delicious lemonade. At least that's the hope, right? We got to figure it out. So we'll figure it out. I know that there's people working hard for everybody in this state, and we'll do what we can to get us through it. We'll get through.
Comptroller Susana Mendoza, thank you for being here. I appreciate the interview. That's going to do it.
Have a great day.
You too.